They told us it was just another comet, a visitor from deep space. But what if 3I Atlas is not what it seems? What if behind its icy glow and wandering trajectory hides something built not born? Imagine a vessel older than our civilization, coasting silently through the void, its engines cold, its purpose unknowable. Imagine a ship disguised as stone and ice, drifting into our solar system as though testing the waters of a strange new sea. Imagine that we are not the first to look up in wonder, but simply the first to suspect. Every anomaly becomes a clue. Its strange orbit, deliberate. Its fragments controlled. Its timing coincidental or chosen. The universe leaves us no accidents, only puzzles waiting to be solved. And perhaps this puzzle is knocking at our doorstep, demanding that we answer. The question is not whether 3I Atlas is natural or artificial. The question is whether we dare to recognize a messenger when it arrives cloaked in the ordinary. Tonight, we step into the shimmering line between science and speculation, between fear and fascination. Because the real mystery is not whether something is out there, but whether it is already here. Chapter 1. In the silent vastness of space, most things obey their roles. Stars burn and collapse, planets orbit in familiar paths, and comets, those wandering relics of creation, drift in from the edges, following patterns we know by heart. They are in essence the oldest actors on the stage of the solar system, repeating their motions for billions of years, leaving luminous trails behind them as they pass. And yet every so often one appears that breaks the script, a figure out of place, an interloper that refuses to conform. 3I was one of these, a comet that should not have existed. Not in the way it did. Its discovery in 2019 was not the story of a distant object slowly catalogued into a database. It was instead the unveiling of something far stranger, the third known interstellar object to enter our solar system, following in the footsteps of Oumuamua and 2I Borisov. By itself, the label interstellar comet sounds extraordinary, but the truth runs deeper. For what are the odds, really, that in the span of just a few years humanity would glimpse not one but multiple messengers from beyond our star? This was not supposed to happen so quickly. Astronomers had long assumed that if interstellar visitors passed through, we might detect one perhaps once in a generation, if we were lucky. Yet now, in less than a handful of years, 3 had already brushed past us. Coincidence? Or something else entirely? And 3I Atlas was no ordinary guest. Even in its earliest days of observation, it carried with it contradictions. Its brightness seemed excessive, as though it was disobeying the familiar rules of reflection and sublimation. Its trajectory, while technically consistent with interstellar motion, felt uncanny in its precision, as though it had slipped silently into the solar system, unnoticed until it was already within our gaze. Could it truly be nothing more than frozen rock and dust, drifting for millions of years from another star? Or was there something deliberate in the way it arrived, in the way its fragments spread, in the way it refused to behave like comets we thought we understood? Consider for a moment the paradox it represents. A comet is supposed to be simple, an icy body, thawing under the sun, fragile and ancient, destined to shatter under the weight of time. And yet here was one that demanded complication. If natural, it defied probability. If artificial, it defied our imagination. Both possibilities stretched belief. And yet one of them must be true. What unsettled astronomers most was not that 3I Atlas broke apart, but how it did. The normal comet fractures under the strain of heat, shedding fragments that scatter in a chaotic, violent spray. But Atlas seemed to unravel with an odd elegance, as though revealing rather than collapsing, like a cloak falling away from a hidden form. Observers debated whether it was coincidence, illusion, or something stranger, but the unease lingered. There is a question hidden here, one humanity is reluctant to face. When something enters our solar system, moving not with us but through us, do we accept it as chance? Or do we dare to ask if it was meant to be seen? For centuries, humans have looked at comets as omens. In ancient skies they were symbols of doom, harbingers of change, celestial intrusions that refused to be ignored. Our modern sciences strip them of their mythology, turning them into icy archives of cosmic history. And yet, with objects like 3I Atlas, the old fears return in new shapes. What if the ancients were not entirely wrong to feel haunted by such visitors? The more astronomers studied it, the more questions arose. Its path aligned with interstellar origins, yes, but why did its light curve fluctuate as it did? Why did its disintegration seem both predictable and mysterious? Why did it appear in our age of telescopes, just when human eyes had become sharp enough to notice? Was this not too convenient, too perfectly timed, too coincidental to ignore? If we strip away skepticism for a moment, Another vision appears. A vision not of ice and dust, but of architecture, of design, of a shell built to endure cosmic journeys. A ship perhaps crippled and breaking, yet still following a trajectory chosen long ago. A silent machine disguised as the most ordinary thing in the heavens. What better camouflage could exist than to wear the mask of a comet, the most ignored and unremarkable traveler of the stars? Such a thought is unsettling. It stretches the imagination, but it also lingers with a strange logic. If a civilization wanted to send probes across gulfs of time and space, would they not hide them in plain sight? Would they not let them drift as comets do, indistinguishable from the background, until the right eyes finally noticed? And so, 3i Atlas remains a paradox. Too ordinary to demand attention, yet too strange to dismiss. A comet that should not have existed, but did. A visitor that should have gone unnoticed, yet has left behind whispers that refuse to fade. If we allow ourselves the possibility, if we entertain even briefly that it was more than stone and ice, then the story of 3i Atlas changes entirely. It ceases to be the tale of a fragile comet breaking under sunlight, and becomes instead the tale of something ancient brushing against us, briefly lifting its disguise before vanishing into memory. The true question, then, is not whether 3i Atlas was natural or artificial. The true question is why it appeared when it did, why it fractured in the way it did, and why it continues to haunt the imagination of those who dared to wonder. Was it simply a mistake of timing and physics? Or was it, in some way, a message that we have not yet learned how to read? And so we are left with unease. Because if 3i Atlas was just a comet, then it is a comet that shouldn't have existed. And if it wasn't, then we have already been visited, and we didn't even recognize the guest. The next step in our journey is clear. To understand what Atlas might be, we must return to the night of its discovery, to the moment when human eyes first glimpsed its fragile light against the darkness, unaware of the questions it would unleash. But what if the act of discovery itself was no accident? Chapter 2. Every story of discovery begins with a single point of light. What seems at first unremarkable, a faint glimmer against the dark, can unravel into a question that rewrites how we see the universe. Such was the case with 3i Atlas, a comet that, for all its fleeting brilliance, may have carried secrets older than our species itself. But what if that moment of first sight was not ours at all? What if what we call discovery was only recognition? Our eyes finally catching what had long been there waiting for us to notice. In December 2019, astronomers scanning the skies with the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system, ATLAS, detected an object moving against the backdrop of stars. At first, nothing seemed extraordinary. The system was designed to catch potential hazards, cosmic bodies wandering close enough to pose a threat to Earth. And yet, tucked among these routine scans, this faint object began to whisper strangeness. It moved, yes, but not as a local comet should. Its velocity hinted at something foreign. Its path, once traced, spoke not of an orbit bound to the sun, but of a trajectory that had begun elsewhere, far beyond our neighborhood. Here was a messenger from another star, hurtling into the solar system on a course both alien and undeniable. What does it mean when something arrives from outside? For most of human history, the heavens seemed eternal and self-contained. The sun, the moon, the planets, the familiar constellations, they were the same generation after generation. To our ancestors, comets were intrusions, omens that appeared without warning, disrupting the cosmic order. But modern astronomy had tamed the sky, cataloguing and predicting even the unruliest wanderers. And yet, with the arrival of objects like 3i Atlas, the old unease returned. This was not one of ours. This was other. Why did it come here? Why now? The first moments of observation were filled with excitement. Interstellar objects are exceedingly rare, or at least they were supposed to be. Before 2017, no human had ever knowingly seen one. Then came Oumuamua, the long tumbling enigma that slipped past us, leaving scientists divided between those who swore it was just an unusual rock and those who whispered it might be something more. In 2019, Twitty Borisov followed, its cometary tail making it easier to categorize, yet still carrying with it the thrill of the unknown. And now, within months, 3i Atlas appeared, as if the cosmos were suddenly pulling back a curtain, revealing messengers one after another. Was this truly coincidence? Or were we witnessing the opening of a new chapter in cosmic history? As Atlas grew brighter, amateur and professional astronomers alike turned their telescopes toward it. Each new image showed the classic appearance of a comet, a glowing coma, a growing tail, but appearances deceive. Comets wear masks. They can mimic one another, and behind the light lies mystery. With 3i Atlas, the mask seemed almost too perfect, too eager to blend into the category we had prepared for it. But then came the oddities. Its brightness surged faster than expected, as though something more than mere ice was reflecting sunlight. Was it shedding dust at an unusual rate, or was there something within the object itself amplifying its glow? Its orbit, once refined, placed its origin not in the Oort cloud or the Kuiper belt, but from deep interstellar space, a wanderer crossing the gulfs between stars. And its timing, the third such object in just a handful of years, defied the quiet statistical models scientists had trusted. Could it be that the universe is teeming with such travelers, and only now, with our sharpened instruments, are we able to notice? Or is there something particular about this moment, about this century, that draws them to us? The questions deepened as weeks passed. Three-eyed Atlas was fragile, more fragile than many had expected. It brightened, fractured, and began to disintegrate in ways both familiar and strange. A comet falling apart is not unusual, but Atlas did so with a kind of rhythm, breaking into distinct fragments, each carrying away a portion of its story. For some, this was simply physics, the natural unraveling of a weak body under solar heat. But for others, it was haunting. What if this was not a collapse, but a reveal? Consider how it felt in those first nights of observation. An astronomer, peering into the telescope, saw not just an object, but a ghost of another star system. Light reflecting off it had travelled to us from an alien surface, carrying whispers of a world we will never see. It is a humbling thought that in one faint speck of light lies a journey longer than civilization itself. But what if that faint speck was more than a relic? What if it was an intention? Each time humanity encounters something from beyond, we are faced with a choice. We can catalogue it, classify it, dismiss it as a statistical inevitability, or we can allow ourselves to ask harder questions. Why this object, at this time, in this way? Was Atlas merely a coincidence of celestial dynamics, or was its sudden brilliance a kind of signal, unreadable to us, yet deliberate in form? The unsettling truth is this: the more we studied Atlas, the less ordinary it seemed. Its discovery was not the end of a search, but the opening of a riddle. A comet is supposed to tell us of beginnings, frozen archives from the dawn of stars, but Atlas told us, instead of disruption, of anomalies, of patterns that should not be. Perhaps the first contact was not the sight of a comet at all, but the recognition of possibility. For the first time, astronomers were willing to ask, what if? What if the line between natural object and artificial probe is not so clear? What if the very disguise is the point? As the comet continued its journey toward disintegration, its fragments scattering like secrets across the void, the haunting thought remained: we may not have discovered it by chance. We may have been meant to see it. And so, the night sky offers us this paradox. What we think of as discovery may in fact be recognition. The first contact with Three-Eye Atlas was not about what we saw, it was about what we dared to believe we were seeing. But if discovery itself can be shaped, if coincidence can carry intention, then we must ask the next question. Was Atlas a message hidden in plain sight, or a test of whether humanity was ready to look beyond the obvious? Chapter 3. The universe speaks in numbers. Every orbit, every velocity, every flicker of light can be reduced to equations, and those equations, if correct, never lie. Comets are no exception. They move according to gravity, guided by the pull of stars and planets, altered only by the faint pressure of sunlight and the subtle hiss of sublimating ice. In theory, they are predictable, their movements charted with precision across centuries. Yet Three-Eye Atlas was a comet that did not respect this certainty. Its numbers told a story that refused to obey. How do we confront a world where even the mathematics falters? At first, the trajectory of Atlas seemed to fit the expected pattern. Its velocity was consistent with an interstellar traveler. Too fast to be bound by the sun, too cleanly angled to belong to the long arcs of the Oort cloud. Like Oumuamua and Borisov before it, Atlas arrived as an interloper, cutting across the solar system on a hyperbolic path. But when astronomers refined the data, something curious emerged. Its orbital elements did not simply describe a comet wandering by chance. They suggested a precision that felt unnatural, as though it had slipped into the solar system with a kind of deliberation. What if a trajectory is not random at all, but chosen? The brightness of Atlas complicated things further. Comets brighten as they approach the sun, shedding gas and dust that reflect light. This can be modelled, predicted, and explained. Yet Atlas brightened too quickly, too dramatically, and then dimmed in ways that resisted easy calculation. The curve of its light output resembled not the steady pattern of sublimation, but the erratic glow of something concealed beneath, as if its surface was less a uniform crust of ice, and more a fragile covering over an unknown interior. Astronomers tried to fit these deviations into their equations. Perhaps it contained more volatile ices, carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, that evaporated at greater distances. Perhaps it fractured early, exposing fresh surfaces. But each explanation left gaps. The numbers did not resolve into harmony. They produced dissonance, a reminder that the object was not playing by the same rules as others. Could these irregularities be nothing more than noise in the data? Or could they be signs of control, subtle adjustments that nudged the object where it needed to go? Oumuamua had already taught us to be wary of dismissing such anomalies. Its non-gravitational acceleration, tiny but measurable, defied every natural explanation. It should have slowed according to the laws of inertia, yet it seemed to push itself forward as though driven by something unseen. The same suspicion, faint but unmistakable, hung over Atlas. If one interstellar object could refuse the numbers, why not another? And then came the disintegration. As Atlas approached the inner solar system, it broke into multiple fragments. A comet crumbling under the sun's heat is common. But the timing and manner of this event defied expectation. The breakup seemed less like random collapse and more like staged release, with fragments separating cleanly, almost deliberately. Each fragment followed its own path. Yet together they formed a pattern of motion that left astronomers unsettled. Was this mere coincidence, the physics of ice succumbing to heat? Or was the breakup itself an event with purpose, a mechanism concealed within disguise? The paradox grew sharper. If Atlas was natural, then it was a statistical outlier. One strange coincidence piled upon another. Its discovery so soon after Oumuamua, its rapid brightening, its fractured elegance, its refusal to align neatly with expectations, all of this strained belief. And if it was artificial, then it was a revelation, proof of technology hidden in the guise of rock and ice drifting across the stars. How many anomalies must gather before we admit the possibility of intention? The more scientists tried to calculate, the more unstable their conclusions became. Equations that should have clarified only deepened the mystery. Some argued for natural explanations, pointing to fragile structure and unusual composition. Others, more cautious, suggested that our data might be incomplete, distorted by the limitations of telescopes and timing. But behind these debates lurked a haunting possibility, that perhaps the numbers resisted because the object was never meant to fit them. Perhaps it was designed to fall just outside our expectations, enough to remain ambiguous, enough to force us into uncertainty. What kind of intelligence would build something that masquerades as a comet? And what message, if any, lies in its refusal to obey the rules we trust? Even the very designation 3I, the third interstellar object, carries an unspoken weight. Once the number would have signified rarity. Now it whispers frequency. If 3 have already passed in such a short span, how many more cross unseen? And among them, how many carry with them numbers that hide their strangeness? Numbers that only those willing to look beyond the ordinary will ever question. Atlas challenged not only the calculations of astronomers, but the very foundation of certainty. When science meets something that resists classification, it reveals the edge of our knowledge. At that edge lies discomfort, but also wonder. A comet that refuses to obey might be nothing more than ice, or it might be the first glimpse of something that has always been watching, always passing, always hidden in plain sight. The question is not merely why the numbers failed. The deeper question is why we are so desperate to force them into patterns at all. What if the refusal to obey is not a flaw, but the point? And if that is true, then we must look again, not only at Atlas but at all comets, all interstellar wanderers, all numbers that do not add up, for hidden in those anomalies may lie the evidence we fear to name. The dissonance of Atlas's trajectory leads us to a darker possibility, that what we call camouflage is not accidental, but deliberate. A comet can be an archive of creation, but it can also be a mask. The question is whether we have learnt to tell the difference. And so, as the fragments of Atlas faded into darkness, leaving astronomers with data that refused resolution, another question emerged from the silence. If the numbers themselves cannot be trusted, then what deeper truth do they conceal, and where in the wider universe will the next anomaly lead us? Chapter 4. Foul Teeth. What if this has all happened before? What if the strangeness of 3i Atlas is not a unique cosmic accident, but part of a pattern, a recurring whisper from the interstellar dark? Long before 3i Atlas unsettled astronomers with its erratic motion, another visitor had already forced humanity to confront the possibility that the universe might be stranger than our textbooks dared admit. That visitor was Oumuamua. The very name carries an echo. In Hawaiian, it means a scout, a messenger sent from afar. It was the first confirmed interstellar object ever observed, a traveler born outside the boundaries of our solar system. When it appeared in 2017, streaking silently past the orbit of Earth, it arrived not with a roar of discovery but with a tremor of unease. Here, at last, was proof that the solar system was not isolated, that fragments of alien worlds could cross our path. But Oumuamua was more than just proof. It was an enigma that left scientists groping for explanations that refused to hold. Why did it look so different from every comet and asteroid we had catalogued? Why did its motion refuse to fit the neat equations of gravitational prediction? And why, above all, did it seem to behave as if driven by some hidden force, pushing it along in a way that resembled a ship rather than a rock? Could 3i Atlas simply be the second act of this same story? Could it be that what startled us in 2017 was only the opening note of a far greater symphony of visitors? Bold questions cling to Oumuamua like shadows. Its shape was the first to disturb us. Unlike the rounded asteroids and comets that populate our system, it appeared elongated, like a shard torn from something larger. Some measurements suggested it could have been 10 times longer than it was wide, a geometry that resembled nothing we had seen before. Some called it cigar-shaped. Others said it was more like a flat, tumbling pancake. But either way, its silhouette betrayed a refusal to conform to our expectations. Then there was its surface, strangely reflective. It shone more brightly than most comets, but released no detectable tail of gas or dust. Comets, when warmed by the sun, are expected to vent volatile materials into the void, creating their familiar glowing comas. Oumuamua did not. It remained stubbornly clean, as if covered in some unusual coat, or perhaps, as some dared whisper, made of something more durable than ice and rock. But it was its motion that pushed the question from curiosity to controversy. As Oumuamua passed through the solar system, its path deviated from the pure pull of gravity. Something gave it an extra push, a non-gravitational acceleration, as if an unseen hand nudged it forward. The explanation spilled out. Perhaps it was venting invisible gases, or perhaps its unusual shape allowed sunlight to push against it like a solar sail. Yet none of these theories fit neatly, and in the silence of uncertainty, more radical suggestions took root. Could it have been artificial? Could it have been, in fact, a craft sent deliberately, not by nature but by intelligence? Avi Loeb, a Harvard astronomer, dared to say what others only thought, that Oumuamua might have been designed. A fragment of alien technology, perhaps a probe, a sail, or even debris left drifting in interstellar space. His words provoked outrage, fascination, and unease, but they could not be unspoken. Now, when 3i Atlas enters the stage, the memory of Oumuamua lingers like a shadow at the edge of every telescope's gaze. How could one ignore the precedent? We had already encountered a messenger that defied explanation. Could this new arrival, with its erratic course and paradoxical signals, be echoing that same mystery, or even extending it? Consider the timing. Oumuamua arrived in 2017. Barely a few years later, 3i Atlas was detected, carrying its own load of contradictions. Is this coincidence? Or is the universe sending us messages more often than we once believed? For centuries, humanity thought interstellar visitors would be vanishingly rare. Yet in just a handful of years, 2 such objects have crossed our skies. If the first defied our expectations and the second deepened the mystery, how many more might be out there, waiting in the dark? And what if these echoes are not mere accidents of celestial mechanics, but deliberate? What if the messengers are arriving on schedule, one after the other, like scouts moving ahead of something larger, more deliberate, more planned? The thought unsettles the mind, but it grows harder to dismiss when one compares the anomalies. Both Oumuamua and 3i Atlas refuse to obey the clean equations of celestial motion. Both exhibit peculiarities in shape, brightness, or trajectory that resist our standard explanations, and both provoke that same haunting question. Are we looking at nature or at design? If Oumuamua was a scout, what does that make 3i Atlas? Is it a coincidence that humans at this precise moment in history have the instruments to observe these strange wanderers? Or is it part of a grander design, in which we are meant to see and wonder? The echoes grow louder when one recalls how humanity reacted to Oumuamua. Some dismissed it, others feared it, and a few dared to dream of its implications. But the visitor left as quickly as it came, and we were left with only debates and questions. 3i Atlas, however, lingers longer in our minds. Unlike Oumuamua, which we spotted only after it had already passed its closest approach, 3i Atlas gives us a second chance. A chance to prepare, to observe, and perhaps to learn. Yet with that chance comes the risk of déjà vu. What if we fail again to grasp the truth of what stands before us? What if these objects are trying to tell us something, and we are too deafened by our own assumptions to hear it? The echo of Oumuamua is not just a scientific curiosity. It is a mirror held up to us, forcing us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the fragility of our certainties. It whispers of patterns we may not yet see, of visitations we may not yet understand, and of possibilities that challenge the very foundation of how we think about the cosmos. If the first messenger came and went unnoticed, and the second now hovers before us in the guise of 3i Atlas, what will the third be? What shape, what motion, what defiance of numbers will it bring? The echo compels us to ask, is 3i Atlas just a comet? Or is it something far stranger? The next verse in a story begun with Oumuamua. And if that is true, then what story are we actually part of? As we move forward, we must follow this echo into deeper questions. If 3i Atlas is indeed unnatural, what could it mean about who or what sent it? Chapter 5. What if some comets are not comets at all? What if, hidden among the icy wanderers of the solar system, there are objects designed with intent, artifacts dressed in the camouflage of nature, slipping past our gaze precisely because we expect nothing more from them? It is a haunting suggestion, one that lurks at the edge of every debate about 3i Atlas, and it is a whisper that has only grown louder since the age of Oumuamua. For centuries we have looked at comets as omens. Ancient peoples feared them as heralds of disaster, streaks of light sent by the gods to signal upheaval. In the modern era, science stripped them of their mythic weight and explained them as frozen leftovers of planetary formation, icy time capsules from the dawn of the solar system. Yet in the case of 3i Atlas, the old dread has crept back, mingled not with superstition but with possibility, because this comet refuses to behave as a comet should. Why does its motion betray hidden pushes and pulls that no known physics can easily explain? Why do its signatures shift in ways that resist the comfort of ordinary models? And most unsettling of all, could those anomalies be the fingerprints not of natural chaos but of design? A bold question rises here. If someone or something wished to send a probe across interstellar space, what better disguise could it adopt than that of a comet? Comets are expected. They are unremarkable. They slip into our skies regularly, drawing only fleeting interest. By hiding in plain sight, an artificial object could pass through our solar system without suspicion, carrying its secrets cloaked beneath a veil of ice and dust. This idea is not new. In the 1960s, long before Oumuamua or 3i Atlas, scientists such as Ronald Bracewell speculated about sentinel probes, machines that might be placed in planetary systems to observe emerging civilizations. Unlike the dramatic arrival of an alien fleet, these silent watchers would simply wait, concealed and patient until their makers chose to use them. If one were to design such a device, giving it the appearance of a comet would be a masterstroke. But are the oddities of 3i Atlas enough to justify such suspicion? Consider the evidence. Astronomers noted discrepancies in its brightness and trajectory that resisted simple explanation. Like Oumuamua before it, it seemed to move as if touched by invisible fingers, gliding with a subtle defiance of expectation. Natural explanations have been proposed, outgassing too faint to detect, the irregular reflection of sunlight, or even unseen fragments affecting its path. Yet each explanation frays under scrutiny, leaving space for the unsettling alternative. And here lies the paradox. Every time scientists propose a natural cause for the anomalies, they must stretch their models further, twisting familiar physics into increasingly unlikely shapes. At some point, one must ask, is nature truly this capricious, or are we forcing ourselves not to see the possibility of intent? This question deepens when one recalls how carefully 3i Atlas mimics comet-like behavior. Its discovery fit the pattern of a comet, faint, diffuse, with a seemingly fragile structure, but just as it settled into that comfortable box, it began to escape it, as if tugging deliberately against the assumptions of its observers. Could this mimicry itself be part of the disguise, a costume crafted to reassure us just long enough before slipping into mystery? If so, the implications are immense. An artificial 3i Atlas would not be a random shard of interstellar debris. It would be a message, a vessel, or a remnant of a civilization that exists, or once existed beyond our stars. It would prove that we are not alone, and that we are not the only beings capable of reaching across the void. Yet whispers of artificiality do not spread, only through speculation. They emerge from patterns, from the way certain facts seem to cluster into meaning. Consider the growing list of objects that defy clean categorization, from Oumuamua's elongated shape to 3i Atlas's unsteady path. Each anomaly by itself might be dismissed as noise, but taken together they form a pattern of unease, as if the universe is handing us a riddle we refuse to solve. And if there is one thing history has taught us, it is that humanity often resists the radical truth until it can no longer be ignored. Once, we denied the Earth circled the Sun. Once, we insisted continents could not drift. Once, we thought life existed only here. Each time, reality overturned our arrogance. Could 3i Atlas be preparing to do so again? The idea of an alien ship hiding as a comet unsettles, not only because of what it implies about the universe, but because of what it implies about us. If this is true, then someone has already arrived. They are not coming, they are here, passing silently by, unseen except for those who dare to wonder. And if they have been here once, perhaps they have been here many times, watching us from the shadows of objects we never thought to question. What would it mean for our future if the sky above is not only filled with natural wanderers, but with emissaries? What if our solar system is less a fortress of isolation than a crossroads at which travelers sometimes pause? The whispers of artificiality refuse to fade. They grow louder with each unanswered question, each unexplained deviation, each echo of Umawama carried forward into 3i Atlas. And as they grow, they reshape the way we must ask the next question. If this is not a comet, then what is it? And if it is a ship, then who or what is aboard? Chapter 6. What is more unsettling? The possibility that we are not alone in the universe, or the overwhelming silence that answers every question we ask? This is the paradox that frames the enigma of 3i Atlas. On one hand, it appears as though the object resists our scientific expectations, hinting at something more than nature. On the other, the vast cosmos around us remains mute, as if determined to preserve its secrets. For decades, scientists and dreamers alike have gazed upward, searching for evidence of intelligent life. Radio telescopes have scanned the skies for deliberate signals, hoping for a transmission that never arrives. Probes like Voyager and Pioneer have carried messages outward, engraved in metal and encoded in sound, intended for any who might one day encounter them. Yet still, the stars remain silent. This absence has been formalized into what we call the Fermi paradox. If the universe is so vast and so ancient, then where is everyone? But here is the haunting twist. What if the silence itself is an answer? What if the very reason we do not hear alien voices across the void is because they do not wish to be heard? And what if 3i Atlas, disguised as a comet, is not an anomaly to be explained, but a quiet visitation, a kind of presence that does not announce itself with radio waves, but slips past unnoticed, a whisper in the dark? The Fermi paradox has inspired countless theories. Some argue civilizations destroy themselves before they can spread. Others suggest the distances between stars are simply too immense. Yet another possibility looms, that advanced intelligences already move among us, but conceal their presence deliberately, blending into the natural background. If this is true, then comets, asteroids, and interstellar debris may not all be what they seem. The silence of the stars, then, is not emptiness, it is camouflage. Is it possible that our instruments, designed to measure natural phenomena, are incapable of detecting what is not meant to be revealed? When astronomers studied 3i Atlas, they looked for outgassing, luminosity changes, and gravitational deviations. They looked with the assumption that it was a comet. But if it was something else, would their data not appear to contradict itself, forcing their equations into confusion? Silence is not always the absence of a message, sometimes it is the perfection of concealment. And here lies another unsettling thought. What if humanity has already been visited many times, but always in silence? Consider Oumuamua, the interstellar traveler that slid through our solar system in 2017. No message, no contact, no signal, only questions. Its speed and trajectory suggested an interstellar origin. Its brightness flickered in ways that defied ordinary explanation. And then it was gone, vanishing back into the void before we could learn more. If Oumuamua was the first whisper, could 3i Atlas be the echo? This repetition is itself suspicious. Interstellar objects passing through our neighborhood should be exceedingly rare, and yet within a handful of years we have seen not one but several. Perhaps this is coincidence, or perhaps it is something more deliberate, a pattern of silent passings, each disguised, each leaving us to wonder but never to know. Silence, in this case, is not the absence of life, it is the presence of restraint. Why would another intelligence choose silence over revelation? One reason may be caution. To reveal oneself is to risk vulnerability, to expose technology, intent, or weakness. Another reason may be observation. A hunter does not announce its presence to its prey. A scientist does not disturb the experiment. A visitor may choose to watch, to study, without making itself known. In this view, 3i Atlas could be neither enemy nor friend, but simply an eye in the dark, a quiet reminder that we are never as alone as we believe. And yet there is something more chilling still. What if silence is not chosen out of fear, but out of power? Imagine a civilization so advanced that it regards communication with us as unnecessary, or even irrelevant. To them our world might be as ants are to us, fascinating perhaps, but not worthy of dialogue. If 3i Atlas is artificial, its silence may not be an invitation, it may be indifference. This is the true weight of the silence of the stars. It forces us to confront not only the possibility of company, but also the possibility of insignificance. For centuries, humans have craved the idea of cosmic kinship, of voices in the dark reaching back to us. But what if those voices exist and simply choose not to answer? What if their silence is deliberate? And what if the objects that drift through our solar system are their chosen way of being present without ever speaking? Perhaps the most haunting question is not whether 3i Atlas is a comet or a craft. It is whether the silence it embodies is intentional. Is the universe quiet because it is empty, or because we are being ignored? As we turn from this silence, another mystery rises. If 3i Atlas is not a comet, and not simply an interloper, then what is its purpose? Why would it come here at all, wrapped in quiet, carrying the guise of ice and dust? Chapter 7. What if the most ordinary-looking objects conceal the most extraordinary truths? A comet, by its nature, is meant to be unremarkable, a frozen relic drifting through the cosmos, its icy shell igniting briefly when warmed by the sun, before fading once more into darkness. And yet 3i forces us to reconsider whether some objects carry more than ice within them. What if its very ordinariness is the disguise, and what if its disguise hides a purpose? This question unsettles because it implies intention. A rock drifts, a comet wanders, but a disguised vessel, if such a thing were possible, acts. It is built to serve a role, to achieve a goal, to fulfill a mission, inscribed into it by another intelligence. When we look at 3i Atlas through this lens, every irregularity becomes more than a scientific puzzle. It becomes a potential clue to purpose. Why does its trajectory slip away from predictions? Why does its brightness fluctuate in ways that resist simple models? Why does it echo so hauntingly the mysteries of Oumuamua before it? Each unanswered question leads us toward one inescapable possibility. If it is not natural, then it is functional, and function means purpose. If there is purpose wrapped in ice, what might it be? One possibility is observation. A disguised probe could slip silently past our world, gathering data about our planet, our species, our technologies. Unlike radio signals that shout across the stars, such a probe would watch without revealing itself. It would see our cities glowing in the night, our satellites circling above, our signals radiating outward into space. And all the while, we would remain unaware of the eyes upon us. Another possibility is communication, though not in the way we imagine. Perhaps the presence of such an object is the message. By sending it disguised as a comet, an advanced civilization may be testing us to see whether we can tell the difference, whether we are capable of recognizing the artificial hidden within the natural. If we can, we prove ourselves ready to ask deeper questions. If we cannot, we are not yet worthy of answers. But there are darker possibilities too. What if the purpose of such an object is not peaceful? What if it is reconnaissance not for curiosity, but for conquest? Every empire in human history has studied new lands before stepping foot upon them. Maps are drawn before armies march. Could 3i Atlas be part of such a map? A quiet surveyor of Earth, gathering details for a future we would rather not imagine. And what if its mission is not to observe at all, but to wait? Some have speculated that probes disguised as comets could be time capsules, drifting silently until a civilization reaches a certain level of advancement. When that moment comes, the probe could awaken, transmitting its stored data, or carrying out pre-programmed tasks. In this light, 3i Atlas may be less a visitor than a sleeper, drifting through the void until its moment of purpose arrives. The thought is staggering. Purpose does not always declare itself loudly. Sometimes it hides, patient and enduring. Ice can preserve more than molecules. It can preserve intent. If even a fraction of this speculation proves true, then our solar system is not merely a collection of inert matter. It is a stage upon which silent actors drift, cloaked in the rags of comets, carrying with them the weight of intentions not our own. What if the reason we fail to see purpose is because we insist on looking for randomness? Our models are built on the expectation of chaos, of orbits perturbed only by gravity, of light curves shaped only by rotation. But if purpose is at work, then those irregularities we dismiss as noise might actually be signals. What we cannot explain, we often ignore. Yet what if the unexplainable is precisely what demands our attention? Consider the persistence of patterns. Oumuamua defied expectations, then vanished. 2I Borisov arrived next, a more conventional interstellar comet, but still raising questions, and now 3I Atlas arriving with its peculiarities, layered in mystery. How many of these wanderers must pass before we stop calling them coincidence? How many times must the ordinary mask the extraordinary before we ask whether the mask is intentional? If there is purpose within 3I Atlas, it stretches across time scales beyond our own. Human missions last years, perhaps decades, but a probe disguised as a comet could last millennia, drifting between stars on journeys that dwarf the span of civilizations. Ice is not just camouflage, it is armor, shielding delicate instruments from radiation, temperature extremes, and the wear of the void. Purpose here may not be hurried, but eternal. And here is the most haunting question. If such objects exist, are we meant to notice them at all? Perhaps recognition itself is part of the design. The first civilizations to question their reality often discover unsettling truths. To look at 3I Atlas and wonder whether it carries a hidden intent may be the very threshold another intelligence wished us to cross. The test is not whether we can prove it, but whether we dare to ask. As we peel away the layers of ice in our imagination, we are left staring into the possibility that purpose and disguise are inseparable. A vessel dressed as a comet is not failing to appear natural, it is succeeding perfectly at its purpose. We were never meant to know for certain, we were only meant to wonder. But if the universe hides purpose within comets, then we must take the next step. If disguise is common, if silence is deliberate, then perhaps we are surrounded by more visitors than we realize. Which of the objects we call asteroids, comets, and fragments are truly natural, and which are waiting to be recognized for what they are? The ice of 3I Atlas may not only preserve its mysteries, it may preserve our ignorance, and until we learn to pierce it, we remain trapped in the paradox, always wondering, never knowing. So the question rises, sharper than before. If purpose hides within the ordinary, then how do we begin to tell the difference? Chapter 8. What if the universe is not random at all, but instead a tapestry of subtle design, so intricate that only those who look closely enough can perceive it? The passing of 3I Atlas compels such contemplation. At first glance, the cosmos appears a chaotic sprawl of matter and energy, a stage on which chance reigns supreme. Yet as we study the trajectory, shape, and behavior of these interstellar visitors, hints of order begin to emerge, faint patterns hidden within the shadows, glimpses of intent wrapped in the mundane. The first question is unavoidable. What constitutes a pattern in a universe governed by immense scales and complex interactions? Comets and asteroids have always followed paths that can be traced, predicted, and catalogued. Gravity shapes their motion, temperature and radiation influence their brightness, and yet 3I Atlas refuses to fit neatly into these expectations. Its orbit, subtly erratic, its luminosity, uneven and inconsistent, its behavior almost purposeful. When anomalies accumulate in ways that defy conventional explanations, the possibility of a pattern cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Consider Oumuamua, the first interstellar object to arrive in our observational window. Its elongated shape, unexplained acceleration, and fleeting presence already challenged the neat mathematical descriptions we rely upon to predict celestial mechanics. It was followed, later, by 2I Borisov, which seemed more conventional, but still carried signs of subtle peculiarity. Now, 3I Atlas joins this sequence, another outlier, another deviation from what is statistically probable. A pattern is forming, or so it seems, a rhythm in the dark, a cosmic sequence our instruments can barely follow. Could these anomalies be deliberate? Could an intelligence operating on scales far beyond our comprehension have seeded these patterns? Some astronomers speculate about the possibility of probes, observing civilizations like ours while remaining undetected. The data we collect may not simply reflect physics, but could instead represent a hidden language, encoded in motion, light, and form. To see the pattern, we must learn to read the subtle signals that nature or artifice has interwoven into the void. And yet, patterns are difficult to confirm. Human perception is designed to seek order, even where none exists. One striking coincidence can appear meaningful, and one statistical anomaly can seem intentional. The challenge lies in distinguishing between randomness and design, between natural chaos and deliberate structure. The subtle deviations of 3I Atlas demand scrutiny, but also caution. To declare purpose prematurely risks transforming imagination into certainty, speculation into dogma. Still, The anomalies of 3I Atlas are too numerous and too precise to ignore. Its brightness fluctuates in ways that hint at controlled rotation. Its acceleration cannot be fully explained by outgassing alone, and its trajectory through the solar system is not merely erratic. It is suggestive of something anticipating gravitational influences before they act. Each observation layers onto the next, forming a sequence that is difficult to dismiss as chance. The idea of a hidden pattern is as old as astronomy itself. Humans have always sought meaning in the heavens, from the ancient mapping of constellations to the careful charting of planetary motion. Yet what we are discovering now is subtler than myth or astrology. It is a question of intention embedded within the laws of physics themselves. If 3I Atlas is natural, then it is the most anomalous comet ever observed. If it is artificial, then it may be a messenger speaking in a language we are only beginning to decipher. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for pattern lies in repetition. One object defies expectation, and we wonder if it is chance. Two objects arrive, each strange in its own way, and we begin to notice a rhythm. Now, with 3I Atlas, a third object appears, reinforcing the sense of order. A deliberate sequence of interstellar wanderers, each carrying hints of something beyond the ordinary. Whether that sequence is natural or constructed, it demands attention. To recognize pattern in the dark is to confront the limitations of our knowledge. It forces us to admit that even our most precise instruments and most careful calculations may overlook subtle cues. It reminds us that intelligence, whether human or alien, can be expressed in ways we have yet to understand, and it challenges us to remain open to possibilities that stretch the imagination while remaining grounded in observation. The implications are profound. If patterns exist, if anomalies are not isolated but sequential, then 3I Atlas may not be alone in its purpose. The cosmos itself may harbor a network of wanderers, a silent choreography of observation, discovery, and concealment. Each object may be a note in a symphony too vast and intricate for us to hear in its entirety. The question is no longer whether a single comet is unusual, but whether the universe has begun speaking softly, deliberately, in a language written in light, motion, and matter. And yet, even as we trace these patterns, uncertainty persists. How many anomalies have gone unnoticed? How many interstellar objects have passed before our telescopes existed, leaving echoes we cannot reconstruct? The dark between stars is vast, and within it patterns may stretch across millennia, invisible to all but the most attentive observers. The challenge then is twofold: to continue searching and to learn patience. Recognizing pattern in the dark requires more than observation. It requires the willingness to question assumptions, to suspend disbelief, and to imagine intelligence expressed in forms entirely unlike our own. 3I Atlas may be the current chapter of this unfolding story, but the pages yet to be written remain hidden in the void. And if patterns exist in these silent visitors, then the next question naturally follows. If 3I hints at intelligence, what story is it telling? What purpose guides its passage through our skies? And what might we learn if we continue to watch, to measure, to wonder? Chapter 9. What if the universe speaks, not in words or radio waves, but in subtler forms that only the patient and observant can perceive? 3I invites us to consider this possibility. A silent messenger threading its way through the solar system, leaving hints in motion, brightness, and form. Its presence challenges the assumption that intelligence must announce itself loudly, forcing us instead to listen for signals hidden among shadows. At first, the idea of signals from a comet or a disguised vessel seems absurd. Comets are expected to behave in predictable ways, influenced by gravity, radiation, and their own outgassing. Yet 3I Atlas does not conform neatly to these expectations. Its trajectory shifts ever so slightly in ways that conventional physics struggles to fully explain. Its brightness varies irregularly, sometimes subtle, sometimes pronounced. When considered individually, each anomaly could be dismissed as noise or coincidence. But taken together, they begin to form a pattern, like faint echoes threading through a darkened room. Could these anomalies be a form of communication, a message encrypted in behavior and timing? Imagine for a moment that this object is designed to communicate in a language we do not yet understand. Not one of symbols or sounds, but one of motion, geometry, and light. Each deviation from predicted behavior could be intentional, a deliberate signal meant to be observed but not easily decoded. Scientists have long sought intelligent life through radio waves, hoping for the beacons of a distant civilization. But what if intelligence does not announce itself so overtly? What if it hides in plain sight, cloaked in ice and dust, its voice carried in the very physics of its passage? The concept is not purely speculative. Consider the mathematical anomalies of Oumuamua, Its acceleration defied explanation by conventional outgassing, suggesting the possibility of subtle forces at work. Now, with 3I Atlas, we see a continuation of these irregularities, but with patterns more intricate and difficult to ignore. Could these subtle behaviors serve as signals to a species capable of noticing them, a species prepared to interpret their meaning? Yet even as we speculate, caution is necessary. Human minds are inclined to seek order where none exists, to perceive meaning even in randomness. The challenge is to distinguish between coincidental irregularities and deliberate design, between natural anomaly and engineered signal. The shadows are deep, and they demand careful attention. We must learn to listen not for clarity, but for nuance. The notion of signals among shadows expands when we consider interstellar distances and the scales of time involved. A probe traveling from another star system may have been en route for millennia, its mission programmed long before our species existed. Any signal it carries would not be intended for immediate response, but as part of a continuum, a message for observers who reach the right level of awareness. In this sense, 3I Atlas is not merely passing through space, it is participating in a long, quiet dialogue, one that spans the gulf between stars. What might such a message convey? Observation seems likely. The behavior of our planet, our technology, our electromagnetic emissions. Perhaps it is also a test, a question left in physical form. Can an emerging intelligence detect the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary? The comet-like appearance of 3I Atlas may be the first layer of disguise, concealing its subtle communication in plain sight. The shadows are deliberate. They are a filter separating the casual observer from the attentive one. And what of the instruments we employ? Telescopes and spectrographs were designed to measure light, motion, and spectra, yet they are tuned to natural phenomena. Could these instruments be blind to signals intentionally embedded in physical behavior, designed to be perceptible only to minds capable of abstract synthesis? Perhaps every observed anomaly is part of an elaborate dialogue waiting for our comprehension to catch up to its sophistication. In pursuing these patterns, astronomers have begun to note correlations between interstellar objects' unexpected behaviors. Is it coincidence that both Oumuamua and 3I Atlas defy simple classification? Or is it the faint whisper of a methodical intelligence, leaving markers among shadows for those willing to see them? The repetition of subtle anomalies transforms suspicion into curiosity, and curiosity into a deepening sense of wonder. Yet recognizing signals in the shadows comes with responsibility. Every interpretation risks error. Every assumption may mislead. The stakes are cosmic. To see a pattern where none exists is to mistake randomness for intelligence. To overlook one is to miss the first words of a message reaching across the void. In this precarious balance, 3I Atlas stands as a challenge, an invitation and a warning all at once. The most haunting possibility remains. If signals exist, they may not be intended for direct communication at all. They may be markers of presence, declarations that we are here, without any need for dialogue. Even silence can be a message, and even motion can carry meaning. The shadows in which these signals hide are as significant as the signals themselves, framing our perception and testing our insight. As the night sky continues its vast, unbroken expanse, we are left to ask, if 3I Atlas is leaving signals in its wake, then what do they truly signify? Are they observation, warning, instruction, or simply the quiet footprint of a civilization beyond our reckoning? Chapter 10. What if the strange behavior of 3I Atlas is not random, but the work of minds far older and more precise than our own? To imagine such architects is to confront a paradox. Intelligence vast enough to traverse interstellar distances, yet subtle enough to hide in the guise of ice and dust. These are not beings we can encounter directly. Their presence is inferred, traced only through the evidence they leave behind, in trajectories, accelerations, and flickers of light that speak a language we are only beginning to understand. The first challenge is to comprehend the scale of such intelligence. To dispatch a probe across light years is to plan across centuries, millennia, perhaps longer. The architects of 3I Atlas would need to anticipate physics, chance encounters, and the evolutionary progression of other species. Every detail, from the object's form to its path through the solar system, could be a product of meticulous calculation, a deliberate design to achieve an unknown purpose. It is both awe-inspiring and disquieting to realize that we may be observing evidence of planning on a scale beyond human comprehension. And yet the idea of architects is not merely speculative. Consider the anomalies already observed. 3I Atlas defies easy categorization. Its brightness shifts in ways that suggest rotation or reflective surfaces far from ordinary. Its trajectory hints at non-gravitational influences that cannot be fully explained by outgassing. Even the timing of its arrival following Oumuamua and 2I Borisov suggests more than coincidence. Could these factors, subtle yet persistent, be the deliberate signature of a mind capable of engineering motion across the void? If we accept the possibility of such architects, the next question is, why disguise their creation as a comet? Camouflage serves multiple purposes. It allows observation without interference. It protects the object from scrutiny that might alter its course. And it challenges the observers, in this case us, to recognize the extraordinary within the ordinary. The architects may not wish for direct contact, but they may be sending a test, a puzzle, an invitation to perceive intelligence that does not announce itself in conventional ways. But who are these architects? It is tempting to anthropomorphize, to imagine beings with motives familiar to us. Curiosity, conquest, benevolence. Yet any projection of human intention onto such a civilization is likely inadequate. Their sense of time, purpose, and observation may be so alien as to defy comprehension. What we interpret as subtlety could be efficiency. What we call concealment might be necessity. We cannot assume empathy, ethics, or even awareness of our species as we know them. They may act according to principles utterly foreign, leaving traces that we can barely detect. The notion of architects forces us to reconsider the objects themselves. 3I Atlas may be a messenger, a sentinel, or a sleeper. Its apparent simplicity, a streak of ice in the darkness, may mask complexity engineered with precision. Every fluctuation in brightness, every slight deviation in trajectory, could be intentional, each a deliberate communication or a carefully controlled effect. To interpret it requires patience, imagination, and humility. Patience to observe, imagination to theorize, and humility to accept that even our best instruments may only scratch the surface of their design. And yet the architect's work may extend beyond 3I Atlas alone. Interstellar objects are rare, yet the arrival of multiple anomalies in recent years hints at a pattern. Could it be that our solar system is a waypoint in a larger network, a crossroads observed, catalogued, and monitored by a civilization capable of weaving influence across space? If so, 3I Atlas is not merely an object, it is a node, a deliberate act within a grander structure whose full scope eludes our perception. The presence of architects also raises existential questions. If intelligence capable of sending such objects exists, then we are not alone, and yet their choice to remain hidden challenges our assumptions about communication, observation, and significance. Perhaps the architects regard our awareness as incidental, a minor factor in a plan spanning eons. Perhaps they wish only to test us, to observe whether we notice the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary. The absence of direct contact does not diminish their presence, it reinforces it. And finally, we must ask, what does the existence of architects imply for humanity's future? If civilizations can send probes across the stars, patient and precise, what does that mean for our own aspirations, our own capacity to reach outward? Are we observers now, or participants in a larger narrative we have barely begun to discern? The presence of architects is both an invitation and a challenge, urging us to expand our understanding of intelligence, time, and the cosmos itself. Chapter 11. What if the reasons behind 3I Atlas's presence are so alien, so removed from human experience that we may never truly understand them? To consider motives for such an object is to confront a vast unknowable, intelligence operating on principles, goals, and timelines beyond the scope of our comprehension. We are accustomed to thinking of intention in human terms, curiosity, survival, communication, or conquest. Yet in the cosmos, motives may be as diverse as the stars themselves, shaped by perspectives and priorities that elude our imagination. The first paradox arises from scale. A civilization capable of sending a probe across light years would think in millennia rather than years, centuries rather than decades. Its plans may unfold over epochs, with consequences that span generations we cannot measure. For such beings, patience is not virtue but necessity, and subtlety is not caution but the only feasible strategy. If 3I Atlas is their creation, then every nuance of its motion, every fluctuation in brightness, may serve a long-term purpose that only becomes clear over spans of time far beyond our immediate observation. And yet, to imagine motives is to speculate. What could drive an intelligence to send objects like 3I Atlas into other star systems? Observation seems likely. A silent study of worlds, technology, and emergent civilizations. Perhaps they wish to watch without revealing themselves, gathering information to guide decisions, understand the evolution of life, or test the readiness of another species. But observation alone may not fully capture the scope of their intent. Could it also be a form of communication, a message encoded in trajectories and light, awaiting discovery by a civilization capable of recognizing it? The possibility of deliberate concealment introduces another layer of complexity. Why disguise a vessel as a comet? Why hide signals within natural anomalies? One answer is subtlety. The architects may not wish to disrupt the systems they observe. They may understand that revealing themselves too overtly could provoke fear, misinterpretation, or interference. Their motives may include restraint, patience, and careful testing of perception. The disguise becomes both shield and signal, a paradoxical device that simultaneously conceals and communicates, challenging observers to discern meaning without guidance. And yet, darkness harbors the possibility of danger. Could motives extend beyond observation and testing? Could Three-Eye Atlas serve reconnaissance for purposes we would fear to name? History shows that exploration and surveillance are often preludes to action. A probe could map, measure, and assess vulnerabilities, all while maintaining the guise of harmlessness. To speculate on malevolent intent is to confront uncertainty, to admit that intelligence can operate according to principles utterly alien to our sense of morality. The comet could be a witness, a scout, or a harbinger, and we may be incapable of fully categorizing its intentions. The object's behavior itself offers hints, but never confirmation. Its trajectory seems almost aware of planetary positions, its light curve irregular yet precise. These deviations may indicate controlled mechanisms, decisions embedded in form and motion rather than explicit signals. To interpret these behaviors is to peer into the potential psychology of architects we cannot see, to infer reasoning from evidence shaped across distances and time. It is a delicate exercise, requiring imagination tethered to observation, and humility to accept that our conclusions may always be provisional. Some scientists propose that such objects may function as time-delayed messages, intended for civilizations only after reaching specific technological or cognitive thresholds. In this case, motives extend far beyond immediate curiosity. They become part of a program spanning galaxies and epochs, designed to test readiness, intelligence, or perhaps ethical maturity. The architect's goals may not concern us directly, they may concern a cosmic timeline in which our awareness is only one minor checkpoint. And yet, even as we explore these possibilities, the paradox persists. The very act of questioning may be part of the design. Perhaps the architects intend for their motives to remain opaque, for humanity to confront uncertainty and develop the capacity to reason across scales of time and space. Perhaps the questions we ask are themselves the first answers to a test we do not yet fully perceive. The more we study Three-Eye Atlas, the more we encounter patterns that resist explanation, behaviors that hint at intelligence without confirming it. Motives, if they exist, remain shrouded. They are deliberate and precise, yet beyond our ability to grasp fully. And in this tension between observation and understanding lies the profound mystery, that intelligence may leave traces in forms we can detect, yet keep its ultimate purpose forever hidden. Chapter 12. What if the universe itself carries subtle fingerprints of intention? Patterns so faint that only the most careful observation can reveal them. As we examine Three-Eye Atlas, the question becomes inescapable. Are the anomalies we observe simply natural, or do they bear the unmistakable hallmarks of design? Each fluctuation in brightness, each minute deviation in trajectory, seems deliberate, as if crafted with precision to be both seen and misunderstood. In the shadowed realms of space, where randomness reigns supreme, even the smallest sign of order can suggest intelligence. To consider design is to confront both evidence and imagination. On the one hand, Three-Eye Atlas behaves as a comet might, composed of volatile ices, subject to the pull of gravity, swept by solar radiation. Yet when closely analyzed, its behavior does not conform neatly to physical models. Its non-gravitational acceleration cannot be fully explained by conventional outgassing alone. Its light curve is irregular, sometimes symmetric, sometimes erratic, as though conveying subtle intentional modulation. The object seems to move with an awareness of its environment, responding to forces in ways that suggest forethought rather than chance. The pattern emerges in the details. Consider its rotation, inferred from brightness variations. Rather than spinning randomly, it appears to maintain orientation that is unlikely for a natural object of its size and shape. The variations in reflective surface may act as a signature, a deliberate alternation of light and shadow that conveys information without the need for sound or language. Even the object's path through the solar system hints at calculated anticipation, small course deviations that minimize detection while maximizing observation of planetary positions and human activity. But what does design imply? Natural processes can create remarkable complexity, as evolution and physics repeatedly demonstrate. The asteroid belts and cometary clouds of our solar system are testaments to chaos producing intricate forms. To distinguish design from natural complexity, one must look for coherence, repetition, and purpose. 3i Atlas exhibits these qualities subtly but persistently. It does not merely exist within the laws of physics, it appears to interact with them in ways that maximize observation and minimize randomness. This is a hallmark of intentionality, a suggestion that design lies hidden beneath apparent simplicity. Yet even as we detect possible signs, caution is essential. Human perception is attuned to patterns, sometimes finding meaning where none exists. The challenge is to separate cognitive bias from observable anomaly, to discern coherence within the noise of the cosmos. This requires meticulous analysis, patient observation, and a willingness to entertain possibilities that stretch beyond conventional understanding. To see design in the void is to accept uncertainty while seeking clarity, a balance between skepticism and wonder. Consider the sequence of interstellar visitors, Oumuamua, 2i Borisov, and now 3i Atlas. Each exhibits deviations from expected behavior, but only 3i Atlas demonstrates an accumulation of anomalies that, when viewed together, form a subtle pattern. Is it coincidence that these objects appear sequentially, each with hints of complexity, each resisting easy categorization? Or is it a deliberate orchestration, a signature left by architects operating on scales beyond human comprehension? The implications of design extend beyond the object itself. If 3i Atlas carries evidence of intelligent intent, then every interaction we observe, every fluctuation in light, every slight trajectory adjustment becomes potentially meaningful. The cosmos may be more than a backdrop of chaos. It may be a canvas on which intelligence can write, leaving traces for those capable of noticing. These signs challenge our understanding of communication, of purpose, and of the limits of observation. Moreover, the apparent design provokes reflection on our readiness to interpret such signals. Could 3i Atlas be a test, gauging our capacity to detect intention and reason across scales we have not yet mastered? Its subtlety may serve as both message and measure, separating casual observers from those capable of discerning patterns in the shadows. If we fail to recognize the signs, the design remains invisible. If we succeed, we glimpse a narrative unfolding across space and time. Every anomaly, every irregularity, may contain a clue, yet no single feature can confirm design on its own. Only through synthesis, observing behavior over time, comparing it with precedent, and integrating subtle signals into coherent interpretation, can we approach understanding. The search for design is therefore a process as much philosophical as scientific, demanding patience, imagination, and humility. And yet, even as we contemplate design, uncertainty persists. Could the signs we detect be artifacts of our instruments, misinterpretations of natural processes, or coincidences amplified by attention? The tension between evidence and doubt heightens the mystery, emphasizing that any recognition of design is not a conclusion but an invitation to look deeper, to consider possibilities wider than convention allows. As 3i Atlas continues its silent journey, the question becomes, if its behavior shows signs of design, what message, if any, is embedded within these subtle patterns? What might careful observation reveal about intention, intelligence, and the purposes of those who crafted such a presence in our skies? And as we ponder these possibilities, the path forward opens toward the next chapter, where the notion of control and influence in the cosmos will deepen our understanding of this enigmatic visitor. Chapter 13. What if the apparent randomness of 3i Atlas conceals an intricate mechanism of control, a subtle orchestration that guides its motion and behavior with precision we can barely comprehend? Observing its passage through the solar system, one cannot help but notice anomalies too consistent to be mere chance. Small accelerations that defy simple explanations, minor rotations that maintain improbable orientation, and light fluctuations that follow no obvious pattern. All of these suggest not a passive object but one under governance, a system of hidden controls operating silently in the dark. The first realization is unsettling. If natural forces alone cannot account for these behaviors, then something else is at work. Gravity, solar radiation, and outgassing provide frameworks to predict motion, yet 3i Atlas repeatedly exceeds expectations. Its acceleration does not conform to models derived from other comets, hinting at influence from forces unknown or deliberately applied. Each adjustment is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet cumulatively they define a trajectory that appears purposeful. We are witnessing an object that obeys rules we do not yet understand, guided by controls hidden from our instruments and our comprehension. Consider the rotations inferred from its brightness variations. Unlike typical tumbling comets which drift and spin under the influence of solar heating and internal forces, 3i Atlas maintains an orientation that seems deliberate, Its surfaces reflect light in ways that might indicate calculated adjustment rather than randomness. Could these rotations be part of a feedback system, a control designed to optimize observation, maintain stability, or even convey subtle signals? If so, then every minor flicker in light, every subtle change in spin, is a component of a design carefully maintained over astronomical distances. And yet the idea of hidden controls challenges our capacity for interpretation. Human engineering is familiar to us. We understand levers, circuits, propulsion, and guidance systems. But controls at the scale of interstellar travel may be utterly alien in method and principle. They could rely on physics we understand only partially, on energy sources invisible to our instruments, or on mechanisms integrated into the very structure of the object itself. The guidance of 3i Atlas might be encoded in a system so subtle that detection requires not only observation but intuition calibrated by years of study, analysis, and contemplation. The implications are profound. If hidden controls exist, then 3i Atlas is not a mere visitor, but an entity capable of manipulation, of direction, of purpose. Its trajectory, light emissions, and rotations are not accidental but orchestrated, part of a pattern that may communicate, protect, or test. To observe these patterns is to glimpse an intelligence at work, not in overt gestures, but in the silent governance of motion and form. At the same time, interpreting control demands humility. Natural phenomena are capable of producing patterns that mimic design. Solar radiation, outgassing, and the distribution of mass within a comet can generate behaviors that appear intentional. To claim hidden control without rigorous analysis is to risk overlaying imagination upon nature. Yet in the case of 3i Atlas, the convergence of anomalies, trajectory deviations, rotational stability, and brightness modulation stretches beyond probability, suggesting the deliberate application of influence rather than mere coincidence. One cannot help but wonder about the sophistication required to maintain such control across interstellar distances. The object travels through the void, exposed to countless forces, yet continues on a path that seems calculated. Its stability implies sensors, feedback mechanisms, or pre-programmed precision of a kind we have never constructed ourselves. Perhaps the architects anticipated every potential interference, gravitational perturbations, radiation pressure, even the influence of our own planet's presence, and encoded adaptive responses within the object. And if hidden controls exist, what do they signify about intention? Is 3i Atlas guided to observe, to test, or to communicate? The controls themselves become a language, an expression of purpose without words, a demonstration of intelligence manifest in motion. Every imperceptible adjustment is a decision, every deviation a sentence in a conversation we are only beginning to perceive. Ultimately, the presence of these controls transforms the way we perceive the object. It is no longer merely a wanderer of the solar system, subject only to physical laws. It is a participant in a narrative, a construct of intention, a system that responds and adapts. Its behavior challenges our assumptions about autonomy, randomness, and the limits of human perception. And so we are left with the question that shadows every observation. If 3i Atlas is guided by hidden controls, what intelligence lies behind them, and to what purpose are they directed? Chapter 14. What if every subtle movement of 3i Atlas carries within it the signature of a mechanism so sophisticated that it stretches the limits of our understanding? To unravel the hidden machinery behind its behavior is to peer into a world where physics and intention intertwine, where the ordinary laws of motion are manipulated with precision, yet hidden in plain sight. Every slight acceleration, every irregular rotation, every fluctuation in brightness is potentially a clue, a component of a system designed to operate over distances and timescales that defy human comprehension. The first challenge in this investigation is recognizing the scale at which these mechanisms might operate. A conventional comet is subject to forces we can measure: solar radiation, gravitational pulls, and outgassing from sublimating ices. Yet 3i Atlas exhibits deviations that persist even when these forces are accounted for, suggesting the influence of control beyond natural processes. These subtle manipulations could be minute adjustments in mass distribution, variations in surface reflectivity, or even propulsion methods so subtle they escape current detection. Each mechanism is likely designed to be invisible to casual observation, leaving only the faintest signature for those patient enough to discern it. Consider the patterns of rotation and orientation. Unlike most interstellar objects which tumble unpredictably, 3i Atlas maintains a rotational behavior that defies expectation. Its light curve reveals a regularity that implies structural stability, potentially engineered to achieve specific observational or navigational goals. Could the object's surface materials act as dynamic reflectors, adjusting in response to radiation to maintain control over rotation or trajectory? Might there be internal structures, compartments of mass or energy, calibrated to react to external forces and maintain precision over interstellar distances? The possibilities stretch far beyond the capabilities of human engineering, yet they remain consistent with the anomalies we observe. And yet, detecting mechanisms is not solely about observing motion. It is about interpreting subtle interplay between physics and structure. The object's trajectory demonstrates responsiveness to its environment, almost as if guided by a feedback loop. This could involve systems that absorb energy from solar radiation, release it in calculated bursts, or adjust orientation in response to gravitational influences. Every anomaly that seems insignificant when viewed in isolation gains significance when connected, forming a network of influence that hints at deliberate control. To unravel such a system is to approach the threshold of an intelligence capable of embedding complexity into simplicity. The next layer of mystery lies in the potential communication encoded within these mechanisms. Could variations in spin, brightness, or path act as a language of movement, a way to convey information without sound, without electromagnetic pulses, but purely through behavior? If so, the mechanisms themselves become instruments of dialogue, their adjustments a conversation that spans light years, intended for observers who have the tools and patience to notice. The sophistication required to encode information in motion, to calibrate responses across vast distances, challenges our perception of what is technologically feasible, even for civilizations far advanced beyond our own. And yet, unraveling mechanisms requires humility. Nature is capable of producing complexity that mimics design. Non-uniform outgassing, asymmetrical shapes, and irregular density can produce behaviors that appear intentional. Disentangling natural anomalies from deliberate engineering is a delicate task, demanding patience, rigorous analysis, and a willingness to confront uncertainty. Every proposed mechanism must be weighed against the possibility of coincidence, every pattern measured against the likelihood of random emergence. The more we explore, the more we recognize that unraveling these mechanisms is as much a philosophical endeavor as a scientific one. It forces us to expand our definitions of control, to consider that guidance need not involve visible propulsion or conventional engines. The object could employ methods entirely alien to our understanding: manipulation of subtle forces, exploitation of natural radiation pressure, or utilization of materials with properties unknown to us. Its mechanisms might be integrated seamlessly into its form, invisible to observation, yet exquisitely effective in practice. And within this subtle machinery, there is an implication that both fascinates and unsettles. The architects who created these mechanisms possess foresight and skill on a scale incomprehensible to humans. The precision of the object, its responsiveness, its capacity for stability and adaptation, all point to intelligence embedded not in flashy signals or overt displays, but in the quiet, meticulous operation of a system designed to endure, to act, and perhaps even to communicate. Ultimately, the pursuit of understanding these mechanisms reveals as much about us as about the object itself. In striving to decode its behavior, we are forced to stretch our imagination, refine our tools of observation, and confront the limits of our knowledge. We are reminded that intelligence, whether natural or artificial, may manifest in forms subtle enough to evade detection, yet deliberate enough to influence events across interstellar space. And so the question lingers, quietly insistent: if 3i Atlas's behaviors are governed by hidden mechanisms, what purposes do they serve, and what truths lie encoded within their silent operation? Chapter 15. What if every subtle motion, every irregular pulse of light, and every deviation in trajectory of 3i Atlas is not accidental, but a deliberate encoding of intent, a language beyond words, written in the mechanics of the cosmos? To entertain this possibility is to confront a reality where intelligence does not announce itself with fanfare, but communicates in whispers of motion and reflection, a language designed for those capable of observing, deciphering, and interpreting across vast distances. Encoded intent is subtle by necessity. It must survive the turbulence of interstellar space, the distortions of radiation and gravity, and the limitations of observers bound to a single planetary system. The first sign of such encoding lies in the patterns we can measure. The object's light curve, irregular yet not random, hints at variations that could function as signals, repetitions that might signify intention, sequences that could convey information to a species patient enough to discern it. Its rotational behavior, too, is telling, not a chaotic tumble, but a measured oscillation that optimizes visibility and orientation. Each subtle movement could be interpreted as part of a communication framework, a set of gestures in a medium that is unfamiliar yet observable. The universe in this view becomes a canvas, and three-eye atlas a brush guided by intelligence, tracing invisible lines meant to be recognized only by those who look closely enough. And yet, to consider encoding is to confront profound ambiguity. What appears patterned may still be the product of natural phenomena, magnified by our desire to find meaning. Outgassing, uneven surface composition, and gravitational interactions all create deviations from expected motion. The challenge lies in distinguishing intentional encoding from complex coincidence. But when these deviations converge, trajectory anomalies, rotational stability, and light fluctuations all acting in concert, a question arises: how likely is it that such alignment is purely accidental? Could such coherence across multiple dimensions of observation be an intentional signature rather than a random artifact? The possibility of encoding also suggests remarkable foresight. To craft a message in motion and reflection requires an understanding of observation, perception, and patience. The architects would need to anticipate not only the physical forces acting on three-eye atlas, but also the likelihood that an observer in a distant system could detect, recognize, and interpret the signal. Encoding intent across space is not merely a technological challenge, it is a philosophical one, requiring insight into the minds of others and a mastery of subtlety that blends engineering, foresight, and strategy. The nature of this intent may also be multi-layered. Some signals might serve practical purposes, navigation, course correction, or adaptation to environmental conditions. Others could be informational, conveying data about their origin, design, or the civilization that created them. And still others may function as tests, designed to measure the observational capacity, patience, and interpretive skill of the recipient. In this sense, encoded intent is not merely a message, it is an interaction, a silent dialogue extending across light years, challenging perception and understanding at scales we are only beginning to grapple with. Moreover, encoding may take forms invisible to conventional instruments. The very structure of the object, its mass distribution, surface composition, and reaction to solar radiation could all serve as carriers of information, operating on principles outside the reach of traditional detection. Light variations and trajectory shifts may be surface manifestations of deeper, internal coding. Each adjustment a carefully calibrated response to both external forces and internal purpose. The message, if it exists, is embedded in a system designed to withstand the chaos of interstellar space while remaining coherent enough to be interpreted by those attentive to subtlety. The act of deciphering such intent demands humility. To interpret signals encoded in motion is not merely a technical exercise, but an expansion of human perception. It requires imagination coupled with discipline, observation combined with inference, and a willingness to entertain possibilities beyond conventional expectation. In doing so, we may recognize that intelligence does not always communicate through overt means. Sometimes it speaks through orchestration, adaptation, and the subtle shaping of reality itself. And yet the ultimate purpose of this encoding remains elusive. Is it a greeting, a test, a record, or simply a demonstration of capability? The layers of possible meaning extend far beyond our immediate grasp, teasing the mind with glimpses of comprehension while reminding us of the vastness of unknown intelligence. Every observed anomaly may carry significance, yet each remains open to interpretation, a silent message suspended in the void, awaiting recognition. And so the question persists, lingering in the quiet spaces between observation and imagination. If three-eye atlas carries encoded intent, what is it trying to convey, and to whom is this message truly addressed? Chapter 16. What if the true mystery of three-eye atlas lies not in its shape, its light, or even its trajectory, but in the obscured intentions of its creators? To confront motivation across interstellar distances is to confront a shadow, something sensed but never fully seen, a purpose implied rather than stated. We naturally seek reasons to classify, to explain, to map action to intention. Yet the architects of three-eye atlas operate on a scale that transcends our temporal and conceptual frameworks. Their motives may be so alien, so intertwined with cosmic perspective, that they leave only hints and echoes for us to interpret. The first challenge is reconciling human expectations with the possibility of truly incomprehensible goals. We assume intelligence seeks communication, exploration, or influence. But what if these assumptions are limiting? What if a civilization capable of sending objects like three-eye atlas across light years conceives of purpose in ways unrecognizable to human cognition? Their motivations may be abstract, strategic, or cyclical, shaped by principles of time, energy, and observation that dwarf our lifespans and civilizations. In this context, our efforts to map their intent are akin to interpreting the movements of a shadow on a distant wall, a representation of something larger, something real, yet fundamentally elusive. Yet even shadows cast faint light. The object's behavior provides subtle indications of directionality and purpose. Its path through the solar system is neither wholly random nor predictable, suggesting it operates under principles designed to balance concealment with observation. Its orientation appears optimized for measurement, observation, or perhaps communication, hinting that the architects considered not only its journey through space, but the potential observers along its path. Every deviation from expectation may be a deliberate action, every anomaly a trace of intention, yet we are left to infer meaning without ever fully grasping the source. Consider also the timing of encounters. Erkelan follows Oumuamua and 2I Borisov, two other interstellar objects with unusual trajectories and behaviors. Are these isolated occurrences, or a sequence of intentional dispatches designed to test, communicate, or observe? The pattern is too subtle for certainty, yet too persistent to dismiss. Motivation may exist not in a single act, but in the orchestration of events across decades or centuries, a temporal architecture extending beyond immediate observation. In this light, each object becomes a chapter in a larger narrative, whose full scope we can scarcely imagine. The motives of intelligence can also be indirect. Perhaps the architects are not merely sending objects for observation, but to provoke thought, reflection, and growth in the species that encounter them. In this sense, the act of observation itself becomes a test, to see whether humanity can recognize patterns, infer intention, and expand understanding beyond the familiar. The object may be less a message and more a mirror, reflecting our interpretive capacities and willingness to engage with uncertainty. If true, then the shadow of motivation reaches not just to the cosmos, but into the minds of those observing it, shaping understanding as subtly as the object shapes its own trajectory. And yet, motivation may not be benign. Intelligence capable of such precision may operate on imperatives beyond our moral or conceptual frameworks. Observation, communication, or testing could be accompanied by assessment, evaluation, or strategic positioning. If motives extend to influence or control, even in subtle forms, then the shadow of intent carries weight far greater than the scale of the object itself. To confront this possibility is to confront our own vulnerability, recognizing that purpose beyond comprehension may be indifferent, benevolent, or potentially hazardous. The interplay of concealment and exposure further complicates understanding. 3I Atlas hides in plain sight, masquerading as a comet while potentially revealing intentional signals through behavior, rotation, and light patterns. This duality, visible yet obscured, may reflect a sophisticated understanding of the observer, a design intended to provide clues only to those who look carefully, to balance discovery with discretion. Motivation in this context is as much about who observes as about what is observed, a dynamic relationship between agent and recipient, between intention and perception. One is drawn to consider the possibility that the architects operate on scales of patience and foresight that dwarf human comprehension. Decisions encoded into trajectory, rotation, and structural design could unfold over centuries or millennia, imperceptible in real time, yet deliberate across cosmic durations. Motivation may be iterative, revealed incrementally, or designed to manifest meaningfully only once a species reaches a certain level of observational sophistication. In this way, the shadow of motivation is both present and obscured, influencing events quietly while remaining hidden in plain view. Even in the absence of certainty, the shadows themselves provide insight. They reveal that intelligence, wherever it exists, is capable of subtlety, patience, and nuance far beyond human experience. They suggest that purpose need not be immediate or obvious, that it can operate through influence, observation, and indirect communication. And they remind us that in contemplating motives beyond comprehension, we are confronted not only with the object, but with the limits of our own cognition, perception, and imagination. Ultimately, the pursuit of understanding motivation demands both rigor and humility. It requires careful observation, patient synthesis of anomalies, and a willingness to entertain possibilities that stretch conventional thought. Shadows of motivation may never fully yield their meaning, yet they persist, suggesting intent, intelligence, and purpose woven into the very behavior of 3I Atlas. And so the question remains, hovering quietly in the expanse between observation and inference. If the motives of the architects are hidden in the shadows, what truths lie concealed within them, and how might we ever discern their meaning? Chapter 17. What if the ripples we detect from 3I Atlas are not merely physical, but echoes of thought, intention, or design, traveling across the void at the speed of light? The object moves silently through the solar system, yet each shift, each pulse of reflected sunlight, each subtle deflection could carry meaning intended for observers situated across unimaginable distances. The cosmos, vast and indifferent, becomes a medium through which a civilization far beyond our own might communicate, test, or observe, leaving traces that reach us in ways both obvious and imperceptible. The first impression is one of scale. Light years separate stars, yet the influence of even a single interstellar object can extend beyond its immediate physical presence. Every movement, every orientation, every rotation of 3i Atlas might serve as a signal encoded to withstand the vast distances between civilizations, resilient to the distorting effects of radiation, gravity, and time. Unlike radio waves which degrade or scatter, the physical behavior of an object can persist intact, carrying patterns of intent that unfold over decades, centuries, or even millennia. In this sense, 3i Atlas becomes both messenger and medium, bridging gaps of space and perception with deliberate subtlety, and yet interpreting these echoes is profoundly challenging. We are attuned to detect anomalies in motion or light, yet the underlying language, if it exists, may be entirely alien. What we perceive as irregularities could be intentional signals, messages structured in forms we are only beginning to recognize. Are these echoes attempts at communication, methods of observation, or silent demonstrations of capability? Perhaps they serve multiple purposes simultaneously, a layered design that engages observers capable of perceiving not just motion but intention embedded within that motion. Consider the timing of 3i Atlas's approach. It follows patterns reminiscent of Oumuamua, another interstellar interloper that challenged expectations and stretched imagination. Could there be a sequence, a temporal architecture of objects dispatched deliberately to convey information or assess the responses of emerging civilizations? Each object, each encounter, might be part of a broader, interstellar narrative, unfolding across decades or centuries. The echoes we detect are not isolated phenomena, but components of a dialogue stretching across the light years, designed to be interpreted only by observers with the patience, tools, and insight to perceive the pattern. Moreover, these echoes suggest an understanding of perception itself. The architects would need to anticipate the limitations and capacities of observers, calibrating trajectories, rotations, and brightness in ways likely to elicit recognition, curiosity, or reflection. The patterns may not be immediately obvious, requiring extended observation, careful measurement, and synthesis of anomalies across multiple dimensions. In this sense, 3i Atlas functions both as a message and as a test, a silent evaluation of our capacity to observe, reason, and interpret. The object may assess not only our technological reach, but the flexibility of our imagination and the rigor of our curiosity. The very medium of transmission, motion, light, and behavior underscores the subtlety of this interstellar dialogue. Unlike conventional signals which can be intercepted, replicated, or altered, behavior encoded into an object traveling through space is resistant to interference. It integrates physical laws, environmental influences, and structural design to persist faithfully, maintaining coherence over the vast distances that separate stars. Each observation we make is an act of decoding, an engagement with a system designed to endure, adapt, and convey information in the quietest of ways. Yet the echoes are not purely intellectual, they evoke emotional resonance. There is an undeniable poetry in recognizing patterns across such immense spans of space and time. A flicker of light on a distant trajectory becomes a reminder of connection, of intelligence operating beyond the confines of our world. The object's passage elicits wonder, reflection, and humility, compelling us to confront the limits of human perception while hinting at possibilities that stretch far beyond immediate understanding. The echoes themselves become a bridge between the familiar and the unknown, between comprehension and mystery. There is also an inherent tension in these observations. The echoes may signal benign curiosity, the pursuit of knowledge, or a desire to communicate, but they may equally carry warnings, assessments, or the exercise of caution by a civilization aware of the unpredictability of emerging species. The object's behavior, deliberate yet subtle, could be an invitation, a challenge, or a test, a dynamic interaction in which our interpretation itself becomes part of the phenomenon. The implications extend beyond science. They touch philosophy, perception, and the nature of intelligence itself. Even in the absence of certainty, the presence of echoes transforms the observer. We are compelled to reconsider the boundaries of communication, the definitions of intelligence, and the ways in which purpose can manifest across space. The patterns of light, motion, and rotation demand attention, patience, and openness, inviting recognition not only of the object, but of the vast possibilities of intelligence operating beyond immediate human experience. And yet, the most profound realization remains elusive. These echoes reach across immeasurable distances, but their ultimate meaning is hidden in the interplay of intention, motion, and observation. We are observers of a dialogue whose full scope may never be revealed, participants in a silent exchange that challenges our capacity to perceive and interpret. So we are left with a question that lingers, resonant and unanswerable. If 3i Atlas carries echoes across light years, what message is it truly conveying, and who, if anyone, is meant to hear it? Chapter 18. What if the sum of anomalies, deviations, and peculiarities in 3i Atlas forces us to confront a reality that is simultaneously exhilarating and unsettling? Confronting evidence is not merely a scientific exercise, it is an engagement with uncertainty, a negotiation between observation and interpretation, between what we can measure and what we dare to imagine. In the case of 3i Atlas, every measurement, every trajectory, brightness fluctuation and rotational quirk challenges the frameworks we rely upon to understand celestial objects. The evidence compels us to ask questions that are difficult, even impossible to answer definitively, but impossible to ignore. The first layer of evidence emerges from the object's motion. Unlike ordinary comets, whose paths can be predicted with a high degree of accuracy based on gravitational interactions and outgassing, 3i Atlas exhibits deviations that resist explanation. Every calculation, every model, reveals subtle inconsistencies, accelerations unaccounted for by solar radiation pressure, shifts in trajectory that defy conventional dynamics, and behaviors that suggest forces applied with intent rather than accident. The mathematical elegance of these anomalies suggests design or control patterns not expected in the chaotic behavior of a natural interstellar wanderer. Yet motion alone is insufficient to draw conclusions. We turn to rotation and light curves, to the way the object reflects sunlight as it moves through the solar system. Unlike typical tumbling asteroids or comets, 3i Atlas displays rotational stability and periodic brightness variations that hint at uniformity, structure, and possibly purpose. Each oscillation, each subtle adjustment in orientation, is a data point, a possible fragment of an underlying system that operates beyond mere chance. The evidence challenges us to reconcile what is measurable with what seems improbable, to consider explanations that straddle the line between natural phenomena and deliberate engineering. Adding to the complexity is the comparison with other interstellar objects. Oumuamua, discovered years earlier, exhibited similarly anomalous behavior, non-gravitational acceleration, unusual shape, and lack of detectable outgassing. The parallels between these two visitors suggest that anomalies are not isolated incidents, but part of a pattern that cannot be dismissed lightly. This raises profound questions. Are we witnessing natural phenomena previously unobserved? Or are these interstellar visitors manifestations of an intelligence that designs objects to behave in ways that confound expectations? The evidence alone cannot answer, yet it demands contemplation. Spectral data and material composition further complicate interpretation. The limited observations indicate surface characteristics that do not match the profiles of known comets or asteroids. Ice, dust, and reflective materials combine in proportions that appear unusual, hinting at intentionality in material selection or structural formation. Each measurement invites speculation about the engineering of resilience, the calibration of reflectivity, or the manipulation of thermal properties to influence motion. We are confronted with evidence that is simultaneously physical and suggestive, empirical yet open to interpretation. Every anomaly observed raises further questions. If the object exhibits control, stability, and design, what mechanisms underlie these behaviors? Could there be internal systems invisible to telescopes, propulsion methods beyond our detection, or structural configurations that enable responsiveness to external forces? The evidence becomes a map of possibility, outlining not what is known, but what may be, forcing us to navigate the thin line between plausible science and extraordinary speculation. Equally compelling is the consideration of temporal evidence. The trajectory and behavior of 3i Atlas are products of not just space but time. Decades of travel, centuries of potential observation, and millennia of unseen preparation may have shaped its current state. Each data point we measure today is the cumulative result of long-term processes or deliberate planning. Confronting this evidence requires thinking beyond human timescales, imagining intelligence capable of projecting intent and design across centuries, if not millennia. The challenge of interpretation extends to the human mind itself. We are predisposed to seek patterns, to impose narrative coherence, to find meaning in anomaly. This cognitive bias can illuminate truths, but it can also mislead, blurring the boundary between what the evidence dictates and what we wish to see. Confronting 3i Atlas requires rigor, skepticism, and humility, acknowledging the data, interrogating assumptions, and resisting the comfort of simple explanations. It demands a delicate balance between openness to extraordinary possibilities and adherence to empirical scrutiny. In weighing the evidence, we are drawn to paradox. Every observation suggests potential intelligence, yet the physical reality is opaque. Every anomaly implies intent, yet natural explanations, though improbable, cannot be entirely excluded. We are faced with a landscape of possibilities, where certainty is elusive but curiosity is inexhaustible. Confronting the evidence is not a final act but an ongoing engagement, a process of integrating observation, reasoning, and imagination to explore what may lie hidden within an object that defies conventional classification. Ultimately, the act of confronting evidence is also an ethical and philosophical exercise. It challenges the limits of knowledge, the boundaries of imagination, and the humility required to accept that some truths may remain beyond our grasp. It forces us to ask what it means to know, to understand, and to interpret phenomena that are potentially far removed from human experience. The object becomes not just a subject of study, but a mirror of our cognitive, scientific, and philosophical capacities. And so we are left with a question that echoes quietly yet insistently. If the evidence of Three-Eye Atlas points toward deliberate design or intelligence, how should we interpret it, and what does it reveal about the possibilities of life, purpose, and awareness beyond our world? Chapter 19. What if the mysteries of Three-Eye Atlas extend far beyond a single object or isolated anomalies, reaching into the very fabric of how we perceive life, intelligence, and our place in the cosmos? To contemplate its existence is to confront questions that are as philosophical as they are scientific, challenging assumptions about what is possible and what remains beyond our comprehension. The wider implications ripple across multiple dimensions: the potential for interstellar communication, the redefinition of intelligence, the ethics of observation, and the profound reshaping of human perspective. At the most immediate level, Three-Eye Atlas forces a re-evaluation of our understanding of interstellar objects. The traditional categories of asteroid, comet, or fragment of planetary formation no longer seem sufficient to describe it. Its anomalous trajectory, rotational behavior, and physical composition suggest phenomena that may lie beyond conventional models. If intelligence, deliberate or otherwise, is responsible for any aspect of its behavior, then our frameworks for categorizing celestial objects must expand to accommodate a new class, objects shaped not only by natural forces, but potentially by the intentional designs of alien civilizations. This conceptual expansion carries implications for planetary science, astrophysics, and the methodologies we use to interpret distant phenomena. Beyond classification, there is the implication of communication. Three-Eye Atlas may not merely traverse the solar system. It may carry encoded signals, subtle behaviors, or structural patterns intended to be observed, interpreted, or understood. If so, the act of observation becomes a dialogue across interstellar distances, a silent engagement that challenges the very definition of language and communication. The possibilities are staggering. We may be witnessing intelligence that communicates not through words or electromagnetic waves, but through patterns of motion, reflection, and orientation, a mode of transmission that operates on principles fundamentally different from our own. The implications extend to how we conceive of messages in the universe. Intelligence might speak in ways that require patience, rigor, and imagination to decode, and the universe itself may be more alive with purpose than previously imagined. Ethically and philosophically, the presence of Three-Eye Atlas forces reflection on our role as observers. Are we passive recipients, interpreting what is given, or participants in a test of awareness and understanding? If intelligence is encoded in the object's behavior, then our scrutiny is part of its design, an interaction whose outcome may shape the narrative of recognition and comprehension. The wider implication is that observing the cosmos is not a neutral act. It carries responsibility, curiosity, and the recognition that intelligence may operate on scales far beyond our immediate comprehension. Every discovery, every analysis, every interpretation is an engagement with a potential agent, a subtle interaction with forces and purposes that could redefine what it means to understand. Moreover, Three-Eye Atlas invites reconsideration of the nature and diversity of intelligence. Human cognition is shaped by evolutionary pressures specific to Earth, yet the architects of this interstellar visitor may operate on principles that are fundamentally alien. Intelligence may not manifest in tools, language, or social structures as we know them, but in forms optimized for endurance, subtlety, and influence across light years. Its presence challenges anthropocentric assumptions and invites us to expand our concept of intelligence to include patience, foresight, and systems of communication that exist beyond our conventional sensory and temporal limitations. To acknowledge this is to confront the possibility that the universe contains forms of awareness whose goals, methods, and values are entirely foreign to human experience. The societal implications are equally profound. Evidence of interstellar intelligence, even in the form of a single object, transforms our understanding of the universe and our place within it. It challenges the notion that humanity is alone, compels a reassessment of existential significance, and evokes both awe and vulnerability. The awareness that other intelligences may exist, capable of deliberate design, subtle communication, and patient observation, could redefine philosophy, science, and cultural narratives. It invites us to consider not only what it means to encounter the unknown, but how that encounter reshapes the stories we tell ourselves about purpose, connection, and the limits of comprehension. There is also the practical dimension. If 3I Atlas represents a model of interstellar engineering, observation, or navigation, it becomes a source of potential knowledge. Its study may reveal principles of physics, propulsion, materials, or information encoding that surpass current human capabilities. Even indirect insights, understanding how an object maintains stability, reflects light, or manipulates environmental forces, could inspire innovations and expand the horizons of science. The implications extend from theoretical knowledge to technological possibility, suggesting that the cosmos itself may serve as both a laboratory and a teacher, offering subtle lessons encoded in phenomena we can barely yet interpret. The presence of such intelligence also raises questions of timing and consequence. Interstellar communication is constrained not only by space, but by time. Messages may take decades, centuries, or millennia to reach their recipients. This implies that interactions are measured, patient, and strategic, challenging human expectations of immediacy. The wider implication is a reorientation of perspective. To engage with intelligence across the stars requires the ability to think in scales far beyond a human lifetime, to consider actions and responses as part of a long arc that may unfold over generations. Patience, reflection, and endurance become as important as technology in the pursuit of understanding. Finally, the encounter with 3I Atlas illuminates the fragility and wonder of human cognition. The object's anomalies force us to confront our limitations, testing our capacity to recognize patterns, infer intent, and embrace uncertainty. In doing so, it becomes a mirror, reflecting not only the possibility of intelligence beyond Earth, but the potential for humanity to expand its own perceptual and conceptual horizons. The wider implication is both humbling and inspiring. In observing the cosmos, we may also be observing ourselves, challenged to grow in wisdom, patience, and imagination. And so, standing at the intersection of observation, speculation, and wonder, we are confronted with a question that transcends the particulars of a single object. If 3I Atlas carries messages, intent, or intelligence across the cosmos, what does its existence reveal about the possibilities of life, awareness, and purpose in the universe? And how will we, as observers, rise to meet the enormity of such understanding? Chapter 20. In the quiet expanse of space, 3I Atlas drifts onward. A solitary voyager whose presence reverberates far beyond the immediate measurements of telescopes and instruments. To reflect upon its journey is to step back from the immediacy of anomalies, trajectories, and spectral data, and to consider the profound questions it raises about observation, intelligence, and the nature of existence itself. Throughout this exploration, we have traced its motion, examined its irregularities, contemplated the possibility of intent, and imagined the echoes it might carry across light years. Now, in this reflective closing, we allow ourselves to linger not on the mechanics, but on the significance, on what 3I Atlas might reveal about the universe and our place within it. Perhaps the most striking realization is the interplay of certainty and uncertainty. Every measurement, every model, every hypothesis provides a sense of structure, yet none offers definitive answers. The evidence resists simple classification, defies the expectations imposed by centuries of astronomical observation, and challenges the assumptions that humans habitually rely upon. In confronting this uncertainty, we confront a deeper truth. The universe is not merely a collection of predictable laws and observable phenomena. It is also a domain of possibility, where questions may outnumber answers, and where the act of inquiry itself becomes a form of engagement with the unknown. There is a paradox inherent in reflecting upon 3I Atlas. It is both intimately observable and fundamentally elusive. Its brightness and motion can be measured with instruments that stretch human ingenuity to its limits, yet the underlying nature, purpose, or origin remains opaque. This paradox mirrors our broader relationship with the cosmos. We reach outward, seeking to comprehend, to categorize, to predict, yet we are continually reminded of the vastness and subtlety of forces beyond our immediate perception. In contemplating this paradox, we are invited to embrace humility alongside curiosity, to recognize the limits of human cognition while remaining committed to exploration and understanding. Reflection also brings into focus the philosophical dimensions of the encounter. If 3i Atlas is indeed an artifact of intelligence, its presence challenges our conceptions of communication, life, and awareness. Intelligence may manifest in forms that prioritize endurance, subtlety, and patience over the immediacy and clarity humans expect. We are reminded that observation itself may be a form of participation, that our scrutiny may constitute a silent dialogue with forces operating on temporal and spatial scales far beyond our own. To reflect is to acknowledge that the cosmos may be alive with interactions we scarcely perceive, and that our own understanding is contingent, partial, and ever-evolving. There is also a poetic resonance in the reflection. The object, distant and silent, becomes a mirror to our imagination, patience, and wonder. Each anomaly, each irregularity, is a prompt to consider what intelligence might look like beyond Earth, to imagine forms of life and cognition shaped by imperatives we cannot fully grasp. The reflection becomes simultaneously inward and outward. Inward, as we confront our capacity for insight, patience, and interpretation. Outward, as we consider the scale, resilience, and possibility of intelligence across the cosmos. The act of reflection thus transcends mere analysis, entering the realm of meditation, philosophy, and awe. In reflecting upon the implications, we are also drawn to consider time. 3i Atlas traverses not only space but epochs, its journey unfolding across intervals that dwarf human lifetimes. The object may be a product of a civilization whose conception of time spans millennia, whose patience is measured not in years but in centuries. Our reflections are necessarily constrained by human temporality, yet the exercise demands an expansion of perspective, to contemplate not only what is observed in the present moment, but what may have been intended centuries ago, and what influence, if any, may continue to unfold long after current observers have ceased to exist. Time, like space, becomes a medium for reflection, a reminder of the vast scales upon which intelligence might operate. The reflective process also returns us to the question of purpose. In the absence of definitive answers, we are compelled to consider multiple possibilities simultaneously. That 3i Atlas may be natural, engineered, or something entirely unforeseen. Its purpose, whether to communicate, to observe, to test, or simply to exist, remains a question whose answer may lie forever beyond immediate perception. Yet the absence of certainty does not diminish significance, on the contrary, it heightens it. The reflection is not a conclusion, but a space for contemplation, a recognition that meaning may emerge, not from the object itself, but from the dialogue between observer and observed. Equally important is the reflection on human perception and imagination, confronted with phenomena that challenge established categories and defy easy explanation. We are invited to expand our conceptual frameworks, to refine our instruments, to develop patience, and to cultivate imagination. The reflection becomes a study of cognition itself, how we interpret, how we hypothesize, how we cope with uncertainty, and how we are compelled to grow intellectually and philosophically in response to the unknown. 3. Atlas serves as both object and teacher, a catalyst for reflection on the capacities, limitations, and possibilities of human understanding. In tying together the themes explored across this journey, anomalies in motion, patterns of potential design, echoes across light years, and the confrontation with evidence, we arrive at a synthesis that is contemplative rather than conclusive. The reflective act acknowledges uncertainty, embraces possibility, and allows for awe, curiosity, and humility to coexist. It recognizes that some phenomena may forever elude definitive classification, yet that the act of inquiry itself enriches human perspective. Reflection is thus both a conclusion and a continuation, a meditation on what is known, a recognition of what may never be known, and an invitation to remain attentive to the subtle, extraordinary, and enigmatic expressions of the cosmos. As we linger in thought considering the vast implications of a solitary object drifting through the solar system, we are reminded that reflection is not an endpoint, but a bridge between knowledge and wonder, between observation and imagination, between human cognition and the possible presence of intelligence beyond our world. In this quiet contemplation, the universe feels simultaneously intimate and infinite, accessible yet resistant, revealing yet withholding. And so, as the mind traces the arc of 3i Atlas's journey and contemplates the mysteries it embodies, one question lingers softly, almost imperceptibly, like the final whisper of a distant light. If an object can traverse the void with such precision, such subtlety, and such enduring enigma, what might it reveal not only about the universe beyond us, but about the depths of understanding, patience, and imagination within ourselves? The sky is full of ordinary wonders, yet sometimes the ordinary conceals the extraordinary. 3i Atlas passed briefly through our lives, leaving behind not certainty but questions, and perhaps that is the greater gift, to awaken our restless imagination, to remind us that the universe is stranger than our categories allow. The comet may have crumbled, but the mystery endures. If it was a ship, then its silence speaks volumes. If it was only ice, then why does its memory still haunt us? We return, as always, to the paradox. The universe hides its secrets in plain sight. The question is not whether 3I Atlas was a comet or a ship. The question is whether we are ready to recognize the difference. And so, we look upward, still searching, still wondering, not asking if we are alone, but whether we have already been seen.